The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
A manhunt over in Ohio, a mystery crime. What led to police finding the suspect of a home invasion slaying of a dentist and his wife? And in Colorado, a man who pleaded on camera for the return of his wife now facing his second round of murder charges. What's next for Barry Morphew and how he got here in the Mother's Day disappearance of Suzanne Morphew? A West Wing actor and director under fire in New Mexico after disturbing allegations from a young victim come to light. It's all about the law and the facts inside the court of law. Let's call to order Court of Opinion. Welcome to Court of Opinion. I'm Julia Janae. Thank you so much for joining us for something a little different here on Court TV. We're getting to our first story, which is in Ohio. For more than 10 days, a manhunt for the suspect in the killings of an Ohio dentist and his wife, Spencer and Monique Tepe. These are the two victims in this case. They were found dead inside of their home. Their two young children also there, found alive. This situation gripped the community. It captured national headlines, including right here on Court of Opinion last week. We entered the weekend not knowing if police had a suspect and who the suspect could be. We learned over the weekend, though, that manhunt has come to an end. Police announced an arrest in the case, identifying the suspect as none other than Monique Tepe's ex-husband. Michael David McKee was arrested on Saturday and charged with 2 counts of murder. Now, McKee and Monique had married back in 2015, and they divorced just 2 years later, according to court documents. The two didn't have any kids together, and McKee made his first appearance in court in Illinois today, where he lives. That's where we find, rather in Ohio, we find field reporter Cody Thomas, who is live in Columbus, where the crime happened. And Cody, tell me the details of what happened in court today, why it's in Illinois, and what's going to happen next for this case.
Well, yeah, Julia, it was a very brief court appearance today, lasting less than 2 minutes, and that's because that's where Michael McKee was arrested. He wasn't arrested right here in Ohio where the crimes took place. He was arrested back home because he is a vascular surgeon in Rockford, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. But again, very brief appearance today to get that formal extradition process started. Take a look at what happened.
At this time, Your Honor, on behalf of Mr. McKee, I will assert his right to counsel. I will assert his right to remain silent. And Mr. McKee believes that the most expeditious manner in which he may defend himself against the charges pending in Ohio and to plead not guilty would be to waive his right to an extradition hearing and to have a governor's warrant and to agree to his immediate transportation to Ohio.
So, Julia, he waived his extradition hearing. So what does that mean? That means Michael McKee will eventually be transported back here to Ohio to face those premeditated double murder charges here in Franklin County, Ohio. His attorney saying he intends to plead not guilty. Now, the judge did not specify when exactly McKee will be transported here to Columbus, Ohio, but a status hearing on the status of that transfer will be held on January 19th, which is a week from today.
No, Cody, as we've been reporting on this, so many people have said this did not seem like someone who did not know or who was unfamiliar to this couple. But do you know, or are we hearing anything from police as to what led them to identifying Monique's ex-husband as a suspect? And why wasn't he looked into and arrested even earlier than this?
Well, Julia, what led to him being identified is what we see in most cases we cover here at Court TV, and that's video surveillance. They say they saw his car arrive in the area of the home shortly before the window of the murders, and then they saw that same car leave shortly after the window of the murders. And Julia, I went to that neighborhood today. It's an up-and-coming neighborhood here in Columbus, Ohio called Wineland Park. They traced that car from Columbus, Ohio, all the way back to Rockford, Illinois. And Julia, when I went in that neighborhood, it's covered in cameras. Take a look at this. According to investigators and according to court documents, Michael McKee was caught by his car. They tracked his car back to Illinois, where he is a licensed surgeon. They had footage of his car. Now, how could police get footage of his car? Well, if we stop here and look up, right here in front of me on this pole right across from the house, not only do we see the big police camera at the top with 3 different cameras on it, right below it, we see the black flock camera. And before we get here behind the homes, one thing I do want to point out here on the neighbor's home, we see 1, 2, 3 cameras that could capture anyone coming down this sidewalk, any person, any car coming down this general area. Now you see on either side, these are garages to the corresponding homes. This garage right here actually is the home that corresponds with Spencer and Monique's home. But right here, in that alleyway video, we see a bunch of blue trash cans that we see down this whole stretch. But right here on the neighbor's home, we see 2 cameras right here that could pick anyone up walking down this alleyway. So, Julia, no shortage of cameras in the area by far. I mean, the neighbor's house right across the street, we see a flock camera, we see the police camera, just cameras everywhere. And we walk down, even farther down that back alley, we know that's where that person of interest video came out before Michael McKee was arrested, that police put out in order for the public to maybe call in with the tip. But, Julia, even though they tracked his car all the way from this area, all the way back to Rockford, Illinois, the question still looms, how did Michael McKee get inside this house? It has a keypad on both the front and back door. How did he get inside this house that had no signs of forced entry?
Wow, Cody Thomas, thank you for breaking it down for us, even taking us to the crime scene. We know you'll be updating us throughout the day and, of course, tomorrow as well. Cody Thomas, we'll let you go for now, and we want to bring in our power panel. Joining me tonight in studio, we have family law attorney and law professor Randy Kessler. We also have parents' rights attorney David DeLugas with us as well, and joining remotely, former sex crimes prosecutor Stacey Honowitz. It is so great to have all of you here. Thank you for being with us tonight on Court of Opinion. Randy Kessler, I'm going to start with you. Family law attorney, and it turns out it's the ex. But this is an ex from many years ago. What is your opinion on this big news that we got over the weekend?
So it is interesting, right, that it's the ex, but usually it's the immediate reaction. You're going to be with somebody else. You know, maybe it's a delayed reaction. Maybe he's methodical. Maybe he's a surgeon and he's precise and he's going to plan this out. And maybe it's just he got to his wit's end and said, you know what, if I can't have her, we hear this all the time, nobody else is going to have her. And the guy that's got her, he's going to go away too. I mean, maybe that's what it is, but you got a little problem, right? You need evidence. You know, you don't have an eyewitness. You don't have a confession. Do you have fingerprints and DNA? You don't have any of that stuff. So it's going to be building that case, getting the jury to think that maybe he could have done it, and then piecing it together. It's going to be a tough case, but interesting.
David, we got a lot of surveillance video. You heard Cody showing us and bringing us to where likely police were able to get that video of his car.
True, but then again, do we know how much information they got about the car? Do they have the tag number? Because maybe it's a common vehicle, it's a Honda Accord. Maybe it's something very unique, and therefore it's identifying to him. But apparently it was enough information that led them from Columbus, Ohio to Rockford, Illinois, where he's a vascular surgeon. By the way, do you know how many vascular surgeons there are in the United States? About 3,000. Well, as Randy pointed out, 2,999 now. But why would somebody do this? 8 years after their divorce, no kids in common, that doesn't generally evoke the type of emotion that would lead to such irrational and horrible behavior as a murder.
Stacey, let me bring you in. What do you think? What's your opinion on this case and where we are on it right now?
Well, over 30 years, and I can tell you that in a murder case, we never have to know the motive. People want to hear it, and I'm sure we're all sitting around trying to figure out why. Why would he do this? Years later, they had no children in common. Randy can tell you sometimes these events take place when there's a custody issue going on, and the delay. So the fact of the matter is, they have him, they have the surveillance tape. We know that cases can be made with circumstantial evidence. And also, let me remind you of something else. When you have a high-profile case like this, a murder case, there's a lot of things that are not going to be disseminated to the public. So we have to wait and see exactly what they found besides the tape. And you know, drips and drabs, we might hear about what's going on, but once he's arraigned on these charges and the indictment is read, you might hear a little bit more about what they found.
Okay, Stacey's calling you out on your experience, and I do want to hear more about this because here's something that I noticed on the docket or the case detail for their divorce. There was something that was actually entered as an event. It's unremarkable, but it's entered July of 2025. Is there any reason that they would still be having a hearing on what seemed to be an uncontested divorce?
No, I mean, sometimes there's retirement plans that can't be done at the time of the divorce, so you've got to do it later. There are enforcement things. Somebody didn't sign the quitclaim deed to transfer the house over, and now the person in the house is trying to sell the house. And guess what? His ex-wife, his name is on the document, so you've got to go to court to get her to sign that. There could be something lingering like that, but you know, Stacy's the bomb, by the way. She's great, and it's good to see her again. There's been a lot of talk about this was an uncontested divorce. It was a simple divorce. There was no animosity. Well, just because it's uncontested, just because it goes away quietly, doesn't mean there were not bad feelings. I mean, a lot of people that want out, and I've seen it, they will give up more than they should. And the people that give up more than they should, they do it because they want out so badly, and they're the happier ones. The ones that get out, that want out, and the ones that get what they want financially, a lot of times they're still not happy. And I don't know if this was this. We're all speculating, but, you know, Stacey's also right. You don't need a motive, right? But it makes it more interesting. You got to answer that question that everyone wants to know. Why would he do this? Why could it be him? It certainly wasn't random.
David, do you find that unusual that it would have been this perhaps length of time? Let's say they didn't have any contact, that this would be the suspect, and gosh, those poor kids left inside of this home.
And the kids were of the couple, not of the ex and the now ex-wife. I'm speculating, I think we all are, but let me throw something out there. When we read and get the court documents about their settlement, the uncontested divorce, maybe there was some triggering vesting event. He's a doctor. He went to Ohio State University undergrad, medical school. Now he's practicing in Illinois. Perhaps there was something 10 years after the fact. She helped put him through med school. She now is entitled to some portion of his medical practice if he ever sells. We don't yet know. I'm speculating. Of course, that's what everybody watching is doing, but we're guessing. Something may come up.
Maybe he saw her do something like this and got pretty upset.
Oh, dear.
Ohio State people don't like that, but my wife went to Indiana, so got to represent.
Yes, Stacey, can you weigh in on some of that in terms of the animosity that can build over time? Because we've talked about this length, right? We don't need a motive, but jurors sometimes do lean into that, wanting some kind of explanation, which we no doubt may get more of, seeing as how police kept this very much under wraps until the weekend.
Yeah, and you know what? When you're trying these cases, you know, the prosecutor inevitably will say, listen, we don't have to give you a motive, but we know the jurors want it. You're right. They are leaning in. Why would somebody do this? But I think like Randy said and David said, you know, it's a relationship, and we don't know. Just like people that might not have even been married, that were boyfriend and girlfriend, you don't know what's festering underneath. Now, we do see cases like this a lot of times when there has been previous domestic violence, there's a restraining order. Again, what makes this case so fascinating, I think, is you don't see any of that. Nobody's reporting that she ever had a restraining order against them or that there was violence in the relationship. So once again, we are all speculating. We all kind of want to know. And I think as the case progresses, once he's extradited to Ohio and the documents are read and, you know, some of this comes out, we're going to get a little bit of a background into what was going on. But I do want to tell you something that I thought was very interesting. When they interviewed her family, the family made a comment like, you know, we kind of suspect that he might have been involved. Now, making a comment like that could maybe lead us to believe that they were speaking or that there was some kind of animosity. Again, we're going to really all have to wait and see what comes out.
Let's listen to the family. We have some of the sound of the brother-in-law of Spencer Tepe. He was giving interviews leading up to police finding a suspect.
It just seems like it was not a random act where somebody broke in and this, you know, trying to steal stuff. Like, it just seems a lot more intentional than that.
Personal.
Personal, yes. Just unbelievably disgusting that somebody could do something so evil.
Randy, let me get your final opinion on this case and what you think happens next. What are we going to expect to see after he's extradited to Ohio to face these charges?
Well, first of all, I mean, what a beautiful couple, right? That's straight out of the Golden Globes from last night, and you think that couple could have been on there. It's such a tragedy. But I think we're going to see that the police have more than we know. They wouldn't just say, we're going to arrest the ex-husband because we couldn't find anybody else. They've got something, and we're going to find out what it is, and we're going to say that's why they did it, and that's why they moved forward. It's going to be pretty significant. I don't know what it is. None of us can figure out what it is, but it's more than just he divorced her and he's still angry about the divorce. That's not enough to get a conviction.
We will see what comes out about this case. Our power panel is coming with us into the next block. We have to take our break, but when we shift gears, we'll come back in Virginia. We're getting ready for opening statements tomorrow in this trial. One for a man who's charged with killing his wife, and another man and plotting all of this with the family's au pair. He was allegedly having an affair with her. What's the best evidence that we think the jury is going to see? We'll get into it next.
The Court TV podcast will return.
A jury has been seated in Virginia. This happened today in Court TV's newest live trial, the au pair affair murder trial. The defendant in this case is Brendan Banfield. He is facing life in prison if convicted in the deaths of his wife, Christine, and another man who was there, Joseph Ryan. Prosecutors say these murders were part of this larger scheme between Brendan and the family's au pair, Juliana Magahays. Now, she has already pleaded guilty to manslaughter in this case, and opening statements are set to begin tomorrow morning. As we gear up for those, let's take a look at some of the key evidence these jurors are going to be seeing at trial. And for that, we want to bring in Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft, who is on the ground there in Virginia covering this. Kelly, thanks so much for joining. What's standing out to you as a key piece of physical evidence that we expect these jurors to see?
Hi there, Julia. One of the big pieces of evidence that the prosecutors will be presenting in this case is the body camera footage. This body camera footage takes place right after 911 calls were made. So 3 911 calls were made. The first one couldn't really make anything out of the first one, according to dispatch. The second one as well. Couldn't really hear too much on the second one. About 15 minutes later, a third 911 call was made. Brendan Banfield, the defendant in this case, ended up getting on that phone, telling dispatch that someone came into their house, an intruder, that he shot the intruder, and that intruder had stabbed his wife. Let's go ahead and listen to some of that body camera footage. Let's view that.
I called Brendan, it's her husband, he's up there. I told him, I see a strange car, but I don't know who is that. Can you please come here, I'm scared. I was in the car. And then he came here, and then we went inside. The guy, I don't know who it is, he was spanking her. I was just here.
Were you here when it happened, or did you walk up in there and that's how they were?
Yeah, he went upstairs first, and then I went to see what is going on. I left the basement, and then when I went upstairs, Brendan was saying, "Police, drop the knife, drop the knife." He was saying, "Drop
the knife or the gun?"
The gun. And Brendan said, "No, police, don't drop the knife." And then he was saying, "I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her." And I don't know, he started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too, because
it's okay. You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw that before.
So there you heard that, a really big piece of evidence, that body camera footage that prosecutors will be playing here, Julia, as this case gets underway. Opening statements do start tomorrow morning around 10 a.m.
Yeah, Kelly, so much emotion in that video. Stand by, Kelly. I want to bring in our power panel to see what they think about this as some of the best evidence. We have on our guest panel Randy Kessler, David DeLugas, and Stacey Honowitz. David, let me start with you. What is your opinion of that evidence and this case as it's about to kick off?
Well, the body camera footage doesn't really tell me much at all. It doesn't tell me much. I'm not sure what anybody else gleaned from that. But here's somebody that's very emotional. But whether she was involved or not, apparently she's cut a plea deal, so she was involved. But she just saw 2 dead bodies. I haven't seen any, and I hope I never have to see any dead bodies, but I would imagine that would be emotional for me as well. And yet she's trying to fabricate the lie while reporting it to the police officer standing right in front of her. She's doing a marvelous job, it seems to me, by being confusing in what she's seeing, and he was stabbing her and not being very precise, and the officers are letting her ramble and talk, because we all know when you ramble, when you talk, you eventually say something perhaps you're not intending to say that gives it all away. And I think that's eventually what we're going to learn here.
Stacey, if you're the prosecutor on this case and you've got your witness who has taken a plea deal and you have this body camera footage of her essentially saying the exact opposite of what you want these jurors to do, how do you present this to them?
Well, she's a fabulous actress. She could have gotten a Golden Globe last night. You know, if you know what's going on in this case, she was part and parcel of this entire thing. She was waiting for this gentleman to come to the house. She was on the phone with Banfield, letting him know when to come to the house. This was a complete setup. The prosecutors have phone records. She's cut a deal. She's going to flip on this guy. So, you know, how would I present it? She would have to come in and she would have to say she pled to the case, she pled to the charges, that she was involved, that this was all a lie, what she was telling the police officer, and he's going to go down. That's the bottom line. I mean, they have more. This evidence is the initial body camera. The prosecutor's office has delved into this case and found all of this stuff, and so this is just a piece of it, and he's going to be convicted. That's my opinion.
And we expect so much to come out during the opening statements. Randy, before I get to you, I want to bring back in Kelly Craft. She's still with us because, Kelly, I want you to throw into our conversation another key piece of evidence that perhaps is standing out to you in this very unique prosecution of Brendan Banfield.
Julia, the FetLife account. So this is the account that prosecutors are claiming that Brendan Banfield, the defendant in this case, set up to lure a man by the name of Joseph Ryan to the home. Joseph Ryan is the one that answered this ad in which his wife, this is the defendant's wife, was indicating that she wanted a man to come to the house and engage in some sort of violent sexual role play. And the story went on and on as she was going to be asleep. Don't be startled. This is how it was going to be. And at one point, even the nanny, the au pair, she got on the phone with the unsuspecting man to make sure that he understood how the details would go. So that account, a digital forensics analyst is going to be coming in and trying to explain maybe where this came from, who set up the account. The prosecutors are claiming that Brendan set up the account. Defense counsel is going to, of course, counter that and say the evidence doesn't point that way.
Well, Kelly Craft, thank you so much for breaking down this evidence for us. We'll let you go and bring back in our panel to discuss this evidence. And Randy Kessler, you are up. Let's talk about the FetLife evidence in this case. You also mentioned that you were surprised this is actually going to trial.
I mean, you got the other witness, the other defendant pointing the finger at you. He's done. I mean, I'm surprised he's going to trial. I want to tell you that David and Stacey are both right. When she's up there on the body cam, she's convincing, right? I saw dead bodies. I'm confused. But then when you hear what Stacey said and you hear what, Kelly just said, and you piece it together, you look at it through the lens of, oh, she pled guilty, so she had something to do with it. Then you watch that body cam video again and you say, oh, now I see what she's doing. She's trying to get it right. She's trying to say the script that she was written, and she's getting it wrong, and she's confused. You can look at it two different ways. It's what jury trials are. It's why they're wonderful. If you didn't know that she was a defendant and that she was accused, you'd say she's just a scared girl who saw dead bodies. When you know this other stuff, you say, now we know she's a liar, and I can see it.
Yeah, she's talking about dropping the knife or the gun going off, and she's got to get the order right. She's talking about spanking going on, so that kind of gets us to this evidence of the FetLife account. David, you're shaking your head on that one. Tell me what you think about that as evidence, and our jurors going to be able to understand it.
Well, in this day and age, the forensics are going to be outstanding. I'm sure the detectives, the law enforcement, have gone through the computers. They know how the account, where the IP address was, who set it up. It's a fake account. So all of that's going to come through, which is probably what they used in part to convince the au pair that she needed to cut a deal to testify against her lover, the real killer. Although there seems to be some evidence that I've heard that she participated in finishing this gentleman, that she fired the fatal shot. So it's a little surprising that her deal was cut with as much leniency as it was, which can be a defendant's tool.
Sometimes you don't have a good enough case. You need
true, but if you're defense counsel, what are you going to do? You're going to go, she was lying then, she's lying now. Which is it? And she has the sweetheart deal. Maybe she's the real perp, and the blame goes toward her. And that's your only. Well, Stacey will probably chime in. What else can you do as a defense counsel other than cut a deal yourself, because this guy is looking to get the max?
Yeah, Stacey, what do you think about?
Yeah, there is.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know, we're just covering really the surface of what has gone on in this case. There is evidence to show that the defendant was taking the female defendant to the driving range, the gun range, teaching her how to shoot, because this was all part and parcel of what was going to happen. When this guy approached in the house and Banfield was stabbing, he wanted her to shoot. So yes, I mean, look, you could slice it up and you can try to say, is she lying now? Is she lying then? She cut a deal. They were having an affair. The forensic evidence is there. There's a picture of them together. I mean, there is so much talk about. You talk about a circumstantial case, then you talk about direct evidence, and here we kind of have both. We've got the story behind it, having the affair, wanting to get rid of the wife, and then you've got the direct evidence of this other defendant coming in and saying, I shot it, and he told me to do it.
I'd rather have a bad eyewitness. So you got a mixture of both. And like Randy said, well, I don't know why they're going to trial. I don't know what this defense attorney is going to try to allege in this case, but I think it's a weak defense case and a strong prosecutor's case. You'd rather have a bad eyewitness than no eyewitness.
Opening statements are going to be so revealing in this case. They are going to start tomorrow. But last question for anyone who thinks that this defendant is going to have to testify when we've got a witness or a defendant who's also a witness that is going to be taking the stand for sure.
Listen, wait and see, right? You got to sit back and say, was she convincing or was she not? You got to figure it out on the fly and say, I think this jury believed that witness. My guy needs to testify or not.
Unless he's Golden Globe worthy, he can't testify because he's not going to withstand cross-examination by prosecutors when they have this mountain of evidence to lay up against him, and he won't be able to explain it away, certainly not convincingly, because ultimately the jury decides credibility, and this guy has zip credibility going in, and if he testifies, it'll only get worse.
Randy, David, and Stacy, stand by. We're going to get to our break, but again, those opening statements start in the Au Pair Affair murder trial tomorrow there in Virginia. You can watch that right here on Court TV. We're going now beyond the gavel, breaking down the biggest true crime cases. And this man, in the midst of a second prosecution effort over the death of his wife, today he pleads not guilty again. We're going over the biggest moments in this complex case that has been building over the last 6 years. Stay with us.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
And just a confirmation, you left this morning at 5. Okay. And she told you she was going to go bike riding?
She bikes every day, yeah.
Okay.
She's going to bike when she gets up.
So she was asleep in the bed when you left. Did you say bye to her or anything?
No, she's sound asleep.
Okay.
Always leave her.
So the last time you probably actually saw her was this morning. That was it, right?
Yeah, I've been here. I got a big job up there. I've been here all day.
Welcome back to Court of Opinion. Let's go beyond the gavel. Those cases that haven't played out with a trial, but during the investigation process, it has us captivated. And this one has been playing out for 6 years without a trial. We are going to Colorado for the murder of Suzanne Morphew case. Barry Morphew is the one who is accused of killing his wife. This case has seen a lot of twists and turns, and we're going to break down how we got to where we are here, because so many things have happened in the last 6 years. Let's start with when this all happened. May 10th of 2020, Mother's Day. Suzanne Morphew goes missing from her home in Colorado. And then a year later, May of 2021, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with murder in connection with her disappearance. In April of 2022, all murder charges against Barry are dropped by prosecutors without prejudice, so they could bring those charges again. They cited that there was a problem with the evidence and the investigation. Then in July of 2022, Barry Morphew does plead guilty to a low-level mail fraud case and charges related to him casting his wife's ballot in the 2020 election, even though she had disappeared. September 22nd of 2023 is when Suzanne Morphew's remains are found in Saguache County, Colorado. And then fast forward to last year, June of 2025, a grand jury indicts Barry Morphew for the murder of Suzanne Morphew. He's also facing tampering with evidence charges. Now, he was released from jail on bond in September. And today he appeared in court and entered a not guilty plea to 1 count of first-degree murder. Morphew's defense attorney said that he's waiving his right to a speedy trial, which is 180 days in Colorado. So we got a trial date today. Trial is currently set to start October 13th. There's a status conference that's coming up for March 9th and a motions hearing set for July 6th. Let's bring back in our power panel. We have family law attorney and law professor Randy Kessler, parents' rights attorney David DeLucas, and former sex crimes prosecutor Stacey Honowitz is with us. Stacey, let me start with you on this one. What's your opinion on why it has taken so long for this case to get to a trial?
Well, listen, Julie, you have to remember that when they originally filed charges, murder charges against Barry Morphew, they did not have the body. And you don't need it, to go forward in a murder case if you have other evidence. So what happened was they dropped the charges. His side of it is that they didn't have enough to go forward. The prosecutors are saying that they did want more evidence, and they did believe that sooner than later, the body was going to be found. And once that body was found and it was autopsied, they'd have more evidence to go forward in this case. And so that's why we, take so long. And sometimes, as you know, you hear cold cases go, years before somebody is brought to justice. So in this case, I know it does sound like a long time, but the prosecutors have been working on it, have been investigating it. Now that the body is there, now that they had the autopsy, they indicted him again.
Randy, what's your opinion on how much they have? Because, yes, sometimes there are cases where we don't know for many years, but he's been under a cloud of suspicion since the very beginning.
So like all the cases we're covering tonight, they're all hard when they're family members, because think about it. Oh, we got his DNA on her dress. Well, of course, that was his wife. We found some of his belongings. And, of course, they were together. They were married. He had some motive to be around her. Well, yeah, she still had his furniture. I mean, there's so many things to extract. You've got to be much more precise. This isn't somebody that didn't know her, and then all you have to do is connect him and say he was there at the right time. Boom, he had no other reason to be there. This guy had a lot of reasons to be around her. It's a lot harder case to put together.
David, during the break, you talked about the deer tranquilizer. Talk about why that's important, and do you think, from what we know, do prosecutors have enough to convict here?
All right, first of all, I don't know that the prosecutors have this evidence, but it's my understanding that the prosecutors, through the autopsy, through the bone, even though this was almost 6 years ago, discovered a deer tranquilizer, and he is the only civilian in the area who had access to it. It sort of narrows the probability that it's him, which is going to be extraordinarily difficult for his defense team to get him out from that. That is a very unique manner of death. And again, he was the only civilian.
Let's go to our former prosecutor for just putting on your defense hat, Stacey. How do you approach that if you were the defense? How would your opening statement be, especially in light of perhaps that deer tranquilizer evidence that we have heard reported about?
Well, first of all, what all defense attorneys do whenever there's any kind of forensic evidence is they say that whatever was found, something was contaminated, it's decay, it's been so long. I mean, they'll bring probably their own expert in to talk about if there was any other possible way that she could have had it. I mean, there's a myriad of ways where the defense can try to spin this as if it's been so long. The body was found 6 years later. Who knows where the body was? Who knows if there were animals around her that could have had this? I mean, there's a lot of ways that they could try to say that there were other ways that she got this kind of tranquilizer in her bones. I don't think it's going to hold water, and I think David's 100% right. In the autopsy, they found this very niche manner of death, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for the defense to kind of, coupled with the other things. I mean, this isn't just the only evidence. Remember, they have evidence from before, and I think coupled with all of that, the totality of the circumstances, they'll be able to prove this case. And the interesting thing is his family, the daughters, are supporting him. They do not believe that he is guilty of any of this. And that also makes for a very interesting dynamic in the courtroom in a case like this.
Yeah, Randy, that's where I was going next, was the daughters support him. And they likely will be inside of that courtroom front and center showing their support for their dad.
And you never know how much that matters. In a case like this where you do not have an eyewitness, you do not have a confession, you do not have fingerprints on the dart gun that shot, whatever it is, all those little things may matter. You know, in a family law case, in a custody case, if one side has 15 witnesses behind them saying we're a whole community behind this person, if a defendant has family members that support him, love him, look at him, cry for him, how does that affect the jury? Even if it's just that much, that's all you need sometimes, is a jury not wanting to convict him because even his own daughters don't think he's guilty.
That's where we have to leave it. We will see what happens in that case. We need to take a break, but coming up, we've got hot takes and cold facts. Our panel is going to give us their opinions on today's biggest cases, including one involving a popular actor who's been indicted in a child sex abuse case, and the case of a college student found dead after a football game, why her family is now blaming nonprofit entities.
This is the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back to Court of Opinion. We are finishing out the hour with hot takes on the cold facts from our panel of experts. Let's get right to the big legal headlines that are developing. First, here are the cold hard facts on our first story. The parents of a Texas teenager who fell to her death after a rivalry football game. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the entities that organized the tailgate party. Breonna Aguilera, 19 years old, fell 17 stories from an apartment building in Austin, Texas. This happened back in November. Now, at the time, family and supporters called for a deeper criminal investigation. However, no charges were filed, and police classified this as a homicide. This is after they found a digital suicide note from 3 days prior. Now, Aguilera's parents, through their attorney, Tony Busby, they're suing 2 school nonprofits for wrongful death. The lawsuit says that it's because they overserved her alcohol despite the fact that she was a minor. Let's bring back in our panel that's still with us. They all have 25 seconds on the clock to state their case so we can get to all of our stories and get everyone in. We have Randy Kessler, David DeLucas, and Stacey Honowitz. Randy, let me start with you. 25 seconds on the clock. Your take on this wrongful death lawsuit by a family that is clearly grieving the loss of their daughter.
You want answers, you want accountability. Of course you're going to sue somebody. You look, in today's day and age, you actually can sue AI for leading a child to commit suicide. This is a much closer connection. These are human beings that should know better, that should not be offering this much alcohol, that if you're going to be in that situation where you can be in charge of how much alcohol the child gets, you better make sure nothing bad like this happens, or you're going to face a lawsuit.
All right, perfect timing.
Awesome.
Randy, David, let me turn to you. What do you think about not only this lawsuit, but also how it may impact things in the future? It could help other teens who may be being served alcohol at these tailgate parties.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that may be the only positive outcome of that lawsuit, because maybe she had a fake ID. Maybe she wasn't overserved there, but between the event, the ball game, and that evening, because this fall happened much later in the evening. So the burden of proof is going to be on the plaintiffs. This is a civil lawsuit. Yes, there's preponderance of the evidence. But again, how culpable is the nonprofit for the serving?
All right, that's
Maybe
the time,
checked
David.
an ID
Let's get out to Stacey and get her take on this one. I mean, it's a tragic story, Stacey. They even said that they could see that there were times when she was stumbling, dropping her phone in the woods before actually being on that top floor of the apartment building.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a horrible case. It's a tragedy any way you look at it. And I have to agree with David and with Randy on this case because they both made very valid points. You know, you want answers, you want to know. It's like host bartender liability when they say that you've overserved someone that you know is drunk. But in this case, I think the difficulty might be in pinpointing who, what, and when. And that's the problem. If it goes forward, let's see what comes of it.
All right, let's move to New Mexico for our next story. Authorities issued an arrest warrant for director and West Wing actor Timothy Busfield. This is on child sex abuse charges. Allegations are from the set of a series called The Cleaning Lady. A child says that Busfield touched him inappropriately multiple times between the ages of 7 and 8 in the years 2022 and 2024. These incidents were reported to Child Protective Services and then later investigated by police. Now, Busfield faces 2 felony counts. His attorney hasn't yet commented, and the show's studio says its own probe couldn't corroborate these claims. Let's go out to our former sex crimes prosecutor, Stacey Honowitz, to get your take on these charges.
Look, the fact of the matter is you've got a celebrity who is charged with very salacious crimes. We hear about sex crimes now. It's the hottest topic in the news when you're talking about Epstein, all of these things. In this case, we're going to have to wait and see what has happened. Now, the problem with this case is that people are learning that years ago, he was accused of the same thing. And that, of course, puts a wrench in everything. If he did it then, it means he must have done it now. We're going to have to wait and see.
David DeLucas, your take.
Well, what I learned in my search was the accuser years ago was 17 and a 28-year-old woman. Doesn't seem to fit a pattern. I think whether or not the youngsters here are telling the truth, how do we discern that? The allegation I understand is they were let go from their role and other actors replaced them. Is this a retribution on their part?
All right, Randy Kessler, the final word on this one. We've got a situation where he has not been confirmed as arrested or in custody yet, but we expect that to be reported soon.
Is it bad if I keep agreeing with David and Stacey because they're both right on this? You know, the problem is, it was years ago. Touching. What is touching? It's not graphic enough. It's not, you know, we don't know what the accusation is. And he's an easy target, a famous target. He's deep pockets, what lawyers call. He's somebody who probably has enough money to pay a judgment if he's found liable on a civil side. So, you know, it sounds like an uphill battle. Plus, you have children who are going to have to testify, and they're going to have to remember what it was like when they were 7 or 8 years old. That's going to call into question their memory much more than an adult.
All right, that is where we'll leave that story, and we'll move to New York for our final story of the night. 2 former NYPD officers who admitted to sexually abusing a drunk woman in the Bronx in 2023, they've been sentenced to probation. Pix 11 News in New York reports surveillance video showed 42-year-old Julio Alcantara Santiago and 34-year-old Christian Garcia holding a woman up, taking her from a nightclub where they were socializing with her. They were off duty, ultimately ending up at one officer's apartment while she was barely conscious, eyes closed, mouth open. The victim later went to the hospital, got a rape kit. DNA linked both men to this case. One got 6 years probation and sex offender registration, the other 1 year and treatment. David DeLucas, let me start with you on this one. What's your take?
Nothing makes us, the public, more offended than the prosecutor's office cutting a deal, recommending a sentence, and the judge going along with it that looks absurd on its face. They have a duty, we all do, to protect others. And in this case, they're obviously guilty because they're being sentenced to probation, to time served. This is absurd, and I hope I'd like to see something happen to the prosecutor who allowed this to happen and the judge who allowed it, but unfortunately, we don't do that.
Randy Kessler, your take.
Smacks of an old boys club. You saw Scent of a Woman where, you know, oh, well, they're police. We're not going to really throw the book at them. You got to be treated equal, and you probably should be made an example of. If you are the ones who know the law, of all people, how do we have, you know, faith in our law enforcement officers if this is the justice they get? Again, I agree with you.
All right, let's move to Stacey for the final word on this one. I mean, the sex offender registry, that doesn't always happen for a law enforcement officer.
Well, anybody that's convicted of it is going to be put on the registry. Look, I hate to Monday morning quarterback why somebody cut a deal in the prosecutor's office. But I do want to tell you one thing. I don't know if maybe she refused to come forward and testify, and if they didn't have a victim in this case, then they have to cut a deal. That's really the only thing that I can think of right now as to why these 2 guys got off so easy.
Excellent opinions from our panel, Stacey Honowitz, David DeLucas, and Randy Kessler. Thank you all for being with us. We do have to leave it there, but thank you for connecting with us this hour. I'm Julia Janae for Court of Opinion, reminding you we all have opinions. They should, though, be rooted in facts, and we should be striving to respect the other's opinion, even when we don't agree with it.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.